Welcome to the My Rules Are Better podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. I have a few D60s in my dice collection, and I found them today while I was looking through just my bookshelves. I'm trying to clean them up. This is my end of year period, is just cleaning up bookshelves and finding stuff that I'd forgotten I had. It's really quite interesting to take so many books and put them in one place and then go through them periodically. I have a lot of Simbida stuff associated with Palladium books, and I wanted to get them all into shape, which in and of itself will take a lot of time. But the D60 reminded me that there is a narrative which I've resolved in my own mind and resolved with my wife that I haven't talked about in this podcast, and that's associated with England. England, ladies and gentlemen. There were 4 cats that we had. We now have 3 cats. It's imaginable sometime in the next 4 years we will go down to no cats. Having no cats makes it a lot easier to move to England if you want to move to England. So there are a few things that are in the way. Saving a bunch of money is part of that, and ending the lead pile painting with Rothschild, whose name's rhymes with Rochford, which hopefully will happen by February next year or thereabouts. So there's a bunch of stuff that I have to do as well. This isn't just a general move, but it's something that we need to look for. Now, people will ask, when does that move have to exist? Well, the cats, probably the next 4 years, when the cats will finally pop their final things, particularly since we are now down to 3 cats from 4. So we have to play through whatever happens to that. And truth be told, you can actually import cats into England. England is going through its own stuff currently. So for my English listeners, my apologies that it's not a country I would want to live in currently. But it just needs to work through whatever it has to work through and hope that the country that emerges on the other side is somewhat connected to the thing that once existed. I look at the Olympics as being a good example of something which fundamentally damaged England after I left. So whether it becomes even more damaged, who knows? I bought a rule system, Zona Alpha, which is Osprey's version of Just Plain Chaos. They have a version of my game. And I did this because clearly it's the end of the year, and clearly I need to be doing things like buying a rule system which is loosely based upon the potential for stuff that I want to do. I've started writing heavily on the Mushroom Boy, which is now, well, I won't even lament how many words it is, but it's some number of words, and I realized that it relates to a time just in 1995. I mean, this is why it fits very definitely into the Just Plain Chaos rule system and mindset, because I was working in research physics at the time, and if you actually take the Mushroom Boy to its logical conclusion, it relates to a research physics story of a kid I knew, he was a year older than me at university, who made a Faraday cage in order to make plasma, and in the process of making plasma, knocked out a city block worth of power. So the story is basically, isn't it amazing how crazy these kids are? And that's the positive version. The Chainer rules I've had real trouble with. I've had trouble because the only history I can find associated with the First Chechen Wars is associated primarily with jihadists, and nothing really talks about the organised crime component to the funding of the original Chechen War, which is really Chainer, fundamentally, is the people that paid off the military in order to release the firearms were also organised crime figures. They weren't religious figures. And it's very difficult to paint a coherent narrative with regards to the jihadist version of Chechnya, the First Chechen Wars. So I'm literally creating a fantasy, which is what I knew I'd be doing, but in a very strange place. Nothing positive came out of Chechnya. That's the whole narrative with that. So it may be the case that the Mushroom Boy survives and the Chechen rules die down. Who knows? To be continued in my playing space. But it is funny actually going through my bookshelves and finding things like a receipt for a World War I trench knife, which is a German dagger effectively with a hoof for a handle, which is one of the curious things that I own, but actually I purchased probably, well, according to the receipt, I purchased in a period of time in Las Vegas. So clearly your podcast creator did a lot more than he actually editorialized in these particular podcasts. So the Britishness to be continued at some future date, not really given up on, but just going through a series of things that need to be gone through. And it will be actually really interesting, potentially, to live on the same country as Rochford and Nurgling and a bunch of other folk. And who knows, Barney Dicker still has a house there, as I found out recently. So maybe he's not as gung-ho as I've been with regards to my migrancy here, there, and everywhere. Or I don't maintain houses in different countries. No. Anyway. So what am I looking at in the near future? Well, I'm not sure, because this is the second version of the podcast I've recorded. So I may have mentioned I am concluding my painting of the lead pile. Finally. I mean, it's been, 4 years worth of discussion in these podcasts alone. But I will have 3 or 4 boxes worth of unpainted stuff, which I'm just going to keep and hopefully one day paint with my daughters. Hopefully, one day. And the final thing that Rochi is going to do is a Skaven army, a small Skaven army that I found and have collected and sent on to him to get painted, and that's the end of that. I think he might be selling a good portion of my lead pile off, because I've told him that's what he should do with it, because this thing has gone on for way, way, way too long. And particularly if you're saving to move to another country potentially in the future, painting miniatures, painted miniatures, tens of painted miniatures, turning up in very slow permutations through a mail system which really is not fit for purpose. We had some relatively good experience with UPS once now, based on the fact that I could write a customs document to get it out of customs in a day. But it is a very curious thing to have these sometimes lead objects being sent back to you very slowly. I did get an RC vehicle built on Model Rail Radio, which the fellow in England is going to send back to me, and it makes me realise that very few people have the kind of experience I have with the postal system, because I'm a relatively unique cat with regards to the stuff that I'm dealing with. So that is the lead pile, soon to be extinguished. And yes, we'll be back to talking about rules, potentially. Not just places and times and creating rules within those places and times, but potentially new rules. Once I am done with the Mushroom Boy Chainer antiviral stuff, maybe they'll fit in there. I think basically it's all at the same period of time. That's difficulty. I'm really taking somewhere from 1994 to 1996 and distilling it in writing, and then not even creating a rule system, adapting an existing rule system to that time. I mean, the rule system is all about that time, fundamentally. So stay tuned for future developments in this particular podcast recording. I started the first podcast by talking about Spencer Game sending me a podcast to listen to, and how that probably is never really a good way to actually start a conversation with me, because I have, when Spencer Game was actually narrating a podcast, listened to a podcast that someone told me to listen to. It was his podcast, in fact. That is the origin of me knowing Spencer Game, was that Barney insisted I should listen to his podcast, and he insulted my name within the first 5 minutes. I'm like, Barney, why? But now Spencer Game is a relatively good friend, and I understand why he made fun of my name, because apparently my name is funny. And Barney's name and all these other names that are probably slightly funny occasionally, not worth insulting in this particular podcast recording. So, that's my end of year wrap, folks. Tom Barbalet in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is the second version of podcast, so if I missed stuff in the first version, sorry about that. It's just the nature of recording 2 podcasts in close proximity to one another. Signing out.